Hi, I'm Tom, a data engineer from AODN, and in this video we're going to be looking at the Seagrass dataset from the NESP collection. As a quick overview, we're going to be going over how do we connect it to NESP 5.9 datasets, the H3 aggregation and mapping tooling that we use, and in the final video we'll be looking at identifying trend sites. You can see in this table these are all of the NESP datasets available, and we're going to be looking at Seagrass today. Some of the details that might be of more importance to us are the partitioning of the tables and our data. In this case, we're looking at Seagrass, which isn't a partition table, although it is one of the largest single files that we have in our collection. In order to get our notebook up and running, we need to install some dependencies. We recommend having a look at the PyProject file and looking at the dependencies list here. If you're unfamiliar with any of these packages, don't worry, there's plenty of really good documentation online. If you Google any of these with API documentation, you'll find everything you need to know. Right, so let's get this all installed. We recommend using UV as it's a much more modern pip packaging and environment management tool, but you can use regular old pip as well. Conda would probably work too. So our regular commands stand for setting up a virtual environment. We simply create the virtual environment, activate it, and finally we want to install all our packages. And once that's completed, we can run our notebook with Jupyter Notebook, and that will probably launch the console and bring you to this page. Next, let's look at the notebook stack. For input and output, we're going to be using Pyarrow. Pyarrow is the de facto Parquet and Python standard tool, and it works really well within the Python ecosystem. It's exceptionally performant and has some other handy features for us, especially in terms of manipulating Parquet and partition datasets. For computation, we're going to be using Polars. Polars is incredibly similar to Pandas, it's just a bit more modern and works nicer with Parquet and Arrow under the hood. Finally, for all of our mapping, we're going to be using PyDeck. Similar to Polars, it has some nice drop-in replacements working with Pyarrow, and in particular it has some hexagon H3 mapping libraries, which is super handy for us. It makes mapping all the hexagons much easier than it would be otherwise. Alright, so in this section we're going to be looking at connecting to the NESP datasets. Let's dive into the code. So at the beginning here we're doing some regular imports. We're going to be using Pyarrow in this section. We're also importing our utility function, and if you need more details on any of the utility functions, we recommend checking out that video instead. So firstly here we're setting up our file system. This is the S3 file system that we're using. So this allows us to connect remotely to the AWS S3 storage. We have to specify the region, AP Southeast 2, that's like somewhere in Melbourne or Sydney depending on what's going on in the cloud, nice and close to us most importantly. And we also don't need any authentication, so we're setting anonymous to true. Next we set up the Pyarrow dataset. So we simply have to specify the location of the file in S3, so that's in the data uplift public bucket, and the key is the Seagrass Parquet. Now we use the file system that we set up before, and that sets up our anonymous connection to the dataset. In the next lines here, we're looking at listing all of the fragments. Because this isn't a partition dataset, we'll only see one fragment for this. Here we have a utility function which prints the schema of the Parquet file. This gives us the name of the column, the type of the column, as well as additional metadata that we've included along in the Parquet file. Finally, we're going to be looking at the estimated size of the dataset in memory. This is useful to us because we need to know, do we need to pre-filter or aggregate the data before loading it into memory? In particular for AMSA, that's really important because it's a much larger dataset. Seagrass sits somewhere in the middle. So we can see here in our outputs that we have the singular Parquet file. This table describes the Parquet file and its structure and its columns. So we can see we've got the column names, the types, strings and integers, as well as definition of the data that's being included in the file. Of particular note, we also have the H3 index included, and this is at resolution 5, and the Australian Marine Regions tags. So we've pre-tagged with nice human-friendly string filterable tags of the data and the data based off their latitude and longitude. Finally, we can see this dataset comes in at around 2 gigabytes. For most modern systems, this is perfectly fine to load everything into memory in one go, which keeps things nice and simple. At this stage, we haven't actually loaded the data into memory yet. That comes when we decide to call to table here using our dataset. We're also introducing polars here. So similar to pandas, we have a data frame API. In order to load our data into the data frame, we simply call dataset toTable. This streams the data and gets everything ready to go for our data frame. Let's have a look at the data frame itself. Here we can see a regular table, although with polars you might notice that the representation is quite nice. We have around 3 million rows and 21 different columns. In this section we're going to be looking at the observation effort, organism quantity and richness. It's also serving as a bit of a health check on our aggregated dataset. For our plotting tool we're using Altair. Now Altair, you tend to think in terms of channels. You have an X channel and your Y channel. These form the axes on your graphs. Our X channel is static for all of these plots that we want to have, and we're just using the year, so we can set that up front. Next we need to set up our year aggregation of the data. So here is the first introduction to some polars. We're using the group by command to group by the year, and then we're aggregating the dataset name. There's a little bit of cleanup here on the occurrence status. Some of the data that we opted to not change just simply records present or absent. So we're going to make the assumption that present at least includes 1, and absent means there's 0 individual count. The dataset plots themselves take form using the Altair chart object. So we specify the data we want to input into the chart, give some title options, specify that we want a bar chart. This bar has the points plotted so we can see where the actual data points lie on the time scale, with some interpolation to make things look nice. Finally, we encode the X and Y channels. In this case, we have the Y channel coded to the number of datasets, as well as some tooltips, which when we hover the mouse over the elements, we can see more information. The observation and quantity charts are much the same, except we're subbing out the Y channel for the number of records. And for the quantity, the organism quantity. The richness data frame requires a little bit more sophisticated aggregation. We start off with a year aggregation, as with the first, but then we have to perform another aggregation with a cumulative sum to allow us to compute the actual richness value for the aggregated dataset. Again, we have a very similar plot here, but we're using an area chart, and our Y channel is the richness. Finally, we can concatenate all of our charts to give us a nice infographic. Let's have a look at the charts. We can see that the dataset quantity over time is a bit sparse prior to 1970s and has a lot of data collected, and it really picks up around 1994 or the 90s onwards. We can see that there's a nice correlation between observations with the number of datasets that are available given the time period, and similarly a bit of a correlation between the organism quantity, and that makes sense. More surveys, more observations. We can see a bit of a linear trend in the species. This might indicate that we haven't seen everything that we could have, and there might be a bit more research to do, but I'll leave that up to the biologists. In this section of the code, we're actually looking at charting the exact same thing, but separated to the different regions. I won't go through the code again here because there's not much that's changed. Just note that we are separating by the mesoscale water type. Focusing on the outputs, we can see that the different regions have a different spread and quality of data associated with them. The cold temperate waters have very few information, or very few data that is, with only one data set and one recorded year. Dissimilarly, the transitional waters has far more data associated with it, so we might say that we understand this region much better.